Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hi!
Hey!
You're sitting there in your dino PJs, just ready to record an education podcast.
Listen, being comfortable
Tell me
gets the artistic juices flowing.
what's on. What are these?
These are a bunch of different colors of neon and white dinosaur skeletons.
Skeletons, yes.
On a coordinated top and bottom pajama set. Yep. Brought to you by Target. From our latest shopping trip.
Gotta. Mm-hmm. If we are wearing it, there's like an 85% chance it's from Target.
We do a lot of shopping there.
Maybe they could sponsor us.
Maybe they could.
I'm not sure what we have to offer them.
I
other than
really couldn't tell you.
10 out of 10 stars on the Dino PJs.
Yeah.
But anyways, how are we?
Good.
What's going on here?
Well, we just got back from my 10-year college reunion. Mm-hmm. That was quite an adventure, I would say.
'Twas.
I would love to have you sum up. You said to me something kind of profound because you had the perspective of an outsider to this particular college community because you're not a graduate.
Yes.
My college is a little weird. We had a great books program and everyone graduates with a liberal arts degree. So it's a little wonky. And because of that, the college alumni community has a particular set of challenges that come with that wonky take on education. And you had some thoughts, some observations about the group of us who had come back for our 10 years.
We went to such different institutions for our undergraduate that it was really interesting to sit in that large group of your classmates and just kind of hear, because like the point of a reunion is like, what's the last 10 years been like for you, right? Like that's the whole thing. And as I was sitting there, it occurred to me that just based on the handful of conversations I know certainly from, I should say, I was the only person that had 9+ years of experience in something.
In a single career field.
In a single career field since graduation. And it seemed as though all of these people who went to school with you had spent a handful of years working out what was next, and then another handful-ish, right, years kind of doing the entry-level thing. In my head, that's kind of like where you figure out if that's what you're supposed to be doing, right? Like the entry level is kind of the moment where you're like, is this going to become something I want it to be? So it was really interesting for me because one of your classmates asked me about what I do. And I was like, oh, I just started my 10th year of teaching. And he just looked at me and was like, oh my gosh, you've been doing it for that long. How old are you? And I'm all of your age, like we all graduated the same year of college. And it was just really interesting because, of course, when I compare my career to my classmates, I'm actually a year behind a lot of them. Most of my friends this year are starting year 11 of teaching because I did an additional year on mine. So I always feel a little behind everyone. And then in this place, I was a complete outlier because I had a more traditional trajectory, I guess, into my career. So it was really interesting because all of these people were living such interesting. I need a better word than interesting, but it really was because all these people had wild stories. I mean, I'm not gonna like give them away, but like all kinds of experiences. And I was like, oh, I've been teaching English for 10 years.
Yeah.
And there were people who would like lived in vans and pursued writing, and like people who work in tea houses, and now financial people, and people who do taxes, and electricians and med students. And it was just the most wild conglomerate of people, but everyone seemed to have the universal. The first few years out, they were like,
yeah,
now what?
That was kind of the part that I thought was so interesting. You observed that we appear to take a little bit longer than perhaps other peers to identify a career, or at least
a commitment to.
Yeah, let's just say that, because I think we also tend to resist the idea of a traditional career, putting a box around a job title and only ever staying within the confines of that job title. I think that's something else that my classmates and I tend to avoid.
But it was really interesting because now I'm in like year 10 and I'm like, what else could I do? you know? It's a little bit like everyone has some figuring out to do. It's a matter of when they do it. So is the move to do it at first and then work it out? Or is the move to get into something
I think, Yeah, I would say I think some of that was not exactly by choice. The way that my college worked, we didn't have some of the traditional avenues to starting to think about career development as early as others might in their college and professional careers. So I think that some of those questions just weren't really asked maybe in similar timeframes to questions that get asked of students at peer institutions. So anyway, that got me thinking a bit about my own journey and just some of your comments. I was like, that's very interesting. I was like, no, wait, what she's saying doesn't apply to me. But then I was like, I spent the first couple of years out of, so I went to grad school right after, but was unhappy with that program. Decided I didn't want to end up doing that kind of academic work. So I left and I was involved in nonprofit work for a while. And I was like, nope, hard pivot. So that was like a year or two or so or something like that. And then I went into tech. And that comes with its own set of challenges, and it's related to what we are going to talk about today. And that is women in STEM fields. There's a real underrepresentation of women in certain kinds of STEM fields in particular, and there are a lot of reasons for that. We're going to explore and explain some of those. But the nature of that conversation that we had, I thought it was really interesting, and it did send me down this path of looking at challenges, and even challenges that I've discovered more recently within STEM fields of finding your place, the timing of finding your place, how that experience can occasionally be gendered or not, all kinds of different stuff.
So jumping into what is STEM?
For those unfamiliar with the acronym, because teachers do love those.
In the world of education, in the last, especially 10 years, I would say, you've heard of it. It stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, and that includes computer science. Sometimes it's called STEM/CS. Okay.
Very exciting acronym.
Well, it was first introduced in 2001 by scientific administrators at the U.S. National Science Foundation. Britannica.com said this. In 2001, there was an American biologist named Judith Ramley, and at the time she was the Assistant Director of Education and Human Resources at the NSF, the National Science Foundation. And she actually made STEM into a much more catchy phrase than what it originally started as. And we'll get to that later.
Oh, okay. So catchy.
Well, that was just a little plug to keep you listening.
Okay.
So, since this introduction in 2001, I don't know if introduction's really the correct
Well, I think it's the
term.
Introduction of that acronym.
Yeah, it was already
as an
focus.
Right. So there's already an existing educational sort of approach to focusing on science, technology, that kind of stuff.
So, but because of this, the STEM-focused curriculum has been extended all over the world, literally. There are STEM curriculums in Australia, China, France, South Korea, Taiwan, the UK, all over. So this is not a US-only event that happened in the world of education.
Yeah.
There's been a bunch of reports about the rise, and I would also say maybe the upcoming fall of STEM education. Is that too much too soon?
Yeah.
So there's a really important report that came out from 2005, and it was called Rising Above the Gathering Storm. I was able to find a summary and some of the most important parts of it from the national academies. So Rising Above the Gathering Storm was prepared in response to a request by a bipartisan group of senators and members of Congress who asked the national academies to respond to these questions. What are the top 10 actions in priority order that federal policymakers could take to enhance the science and technology enterprise so that the U.S. can successfully compete, prosper, and be secure in the global community of the 21st century? What strategy, with several concrete steps, could be used to implement each of these actions?
That's interesting.
This is their hope, basically, to address this constantly changing state of technology, production concerns. They're concerned about skilled workers, shortages, and basically it was just kind of a hope to cover the USA's butt as we moved forward, because we were lacking in some of these places.
Yeah. And we still are, to be clear. We still have a ways to go. But this is a sort of a broad analysis that Congress asked for on some of these issues, a guidebook to the next 10, 20, 30 years or whatever it might be of federal education policy in this country.
Britannica.com has an article that I'll also include about the effects of this report. It stated that the U.S. National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine emphasize the links between prosperity, knowledge-intensive jobs dependent on science and technology, and continued innovation to address societal problems. It also stated that the U.S. students were not achieving in STEM disciplines at the same rate as other countries. Mm-hmm. And they anticipated that the U.S. would face great consequences if the country could not compete in the global economy as a result of a poorly prepared workforce. So that's what helped kind of move the focus to science, math, tech. And as part of it, then, of course, the economic policy shifted, and so did the education policies.
We're not preparing our students to enter the MySpace workforce.
We were not. And then we accidentally deleted it all. So it didn't matter.
It didn't matter anyway.
And that was years before Facebook locked its own self out.
Yeah, you can check out the episode, The Disappearing Internet, of ours about that if you want to. There's more about that. But anyway, so yeah, this sort of landmark report was meant to wake us up to the realities of a new future completely dependent upon the skills of STEM-related folks. So anyway, STEM, what does it look like? What do we kind of have now?
We've got special schools that are just geared towards STEM learning at all levels.
Yeah.
Middle schools, high schools. We have funding that is truly, I cannot fathom the funding that exists in this world. There was a job posting in Appalachia, Ohio for a physics teacher, and there was a $40,000 sign-on bonus that had been made possible because of STEM funding, and especially somewhere like Appalachia, which is a low socioeconomic,
a depressed socioeconomic area.
Sure. Yeah. So like a $40,000 sign-on, but like I can't even imagine.
Was that for a high school? Do you happen to remember?
I think it was high school physics,
public school.
It was. So some funding that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I didn't get a $40,000 sign-on bonus to teach English. I'll tell you. I'm still waiting. There's a huge focus on STEM-related classes and offerings, and there's also special debt relief for STEM teachers and educators and people in the field.
Yeah. There are a lot of incentives being directed toward educators and educational excellence within STEM. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lots of dollars.
It's a lot of money.
A lot of dollars.
I saw that job posting and I was like, can I teach it?
I might be able to teach. I want to go get another degree.
I can make, bottle rockets and stuff, right?
You can. Sure. Yeah.
I could build a trebuchet.
You could do that.
There's enough paid teachers to support this.
It's time for a mid-career pivot.
Right now.
Right now. So, let's bring it back around and hone in on women in STEM. As you know, Katie, I am a woman in STEM.
Oh,
did you know that?
Is that what your outfit is for?
Yeah.
That's the official outfit of women in STEM?
Women in paleontology.
You are a woman in STEM.
I am a computer scientist. A general
internet
computer
barista.
I'm an internet barista. Yeah, I do not run an educational podcast full time, as it turns out.
Feels like it.
It does feel like it sometimes. It's true, but it's a labor of love.
Yeah.
This is of particular interest to me because it touches my life in many respects, and yours too, because you have to hear me complaining about
women in STEM.
You have to hear me complaining about the underrepresentation of women
about
in
men in STEM is what I hear you complain a lot about.
Unfortunately, okay, so here's the thing. It's not that I'm intentionally complaining about men in STEM. It's just that the only people around me are men, and therefore those are the people about whom I complain. So let's talk about this just a little bit. We got some statistics and some disparities here to cover because they're going to be a little bit number heavy, but they're pretty shocking, so I think they're kind of important. So there's this report by the American Association of University Women called the STEM Gap: Women and Girls in Science, Tech, Engineering, and Math. There's a link. We'll put this in the show notes as always. Pretty recent research. Most of this is within the last 10 years or so. COVID obviously interrupted a lot of research on this stuff because everything just kind of stops at 2020. Like there's nothing to find after 2020.
Nothing is accurate.
So
after March 2020, all the data falls apart.
Yeah, it's kind of wild how much COVID probably affected academic research. But anyway, so this report.
Great time to be running a podcast about education, right when all the data goes away.
Yeah. Yep. So that report stated that women make up only, and this is in the US, women make up only 28% of the workforce in science, technology, engineering, and math. And men vastly outnumber women majoring in most STEM fields in college. Only 21% of engineering majors and 19% of computer science majors are women. So again, I was not a computer science major because I went to weird school, as we've already discussed.
And got a bachelor's in weird.
My bachelor's is in weird. Yes, that is what we call liberal arts majors most of the time. There's another article I found, a 2018 Atlantic article covering this issue called The Gender Equality Paradox, which I actually found pretty interesting when I started to do this research. I had never heard of this particular concept before, but it's this theory that is explored in a lot of research circles in STEM that suggests that in countries that empower women, now I put quotes around it.
In quotes.
I put it in quotes.
Ears.
I put it in quotes because what we consider to be empowering women may be a little, that term may be a little fuzzy. The things that and how we consider an entire country to be empowering women or not is also, again, a little fuzzy. But
that feels like a broad statement.
Well, I think they're using broad indicators like,
we allow women to go to college.
Right. Health, education factors, career factors, mid-career salary factors. They're looking at developed nations versus not, and places where women have civil rights or don't. So those are the kind of broad
But they're probably
categories.
not factoring in how much time someone might get off after having a child. Okay. Sorry.
I mean, that
I'm just smashing
might,
the patriarchy at the moment.
No, it could be a factor that plays in, and we will talk about that maternity leave a little bit later. But anyway, empowering might be a little bit fuzzy. But broadly speaking, in countries that empower women, women are less likely to choose math and science professions. This is statistically provable. Okay. So what they think is going on here, there's a paper published in Psychological Science, and what they think is going on is that this could have to do with the fact that women in countries with more inequality around the genders, more inequality means women are more likely to choose simply what they think is going to give them the clearest path toward financial stability. So, as we all know, there's so much money to be made in technology, I say, as I grind and
look
grind
for the money
to
in
try
technology
to
and
find
appear.
money. Yeah, my daily grind suggests that this is maybe not always as true as we might assume, but anyway, a lot of people know that there's money to be made in technology, and so the theory here is that less women's empowerment in a country means more direct looking into careers that will just make you a lot of money. So another thing that this report found that I thought was very interesting was that countries with the highest degree of equality, gender equality, whatever, again, however they're measuring that, tend to be more welfare state oriented. And what that category is countries with a higher level of social security and social safety net funding, basically. So those statistics are a wee bit grim, at least for me.
Yeah, I'm not feeling great.
Because if I look around my workplace and only 28% of my workplace is women, when women are in fact 50% of the population-ish, something might be weird. Now, that doesn't mean it's necessarily automatically bad, but you might want to look into it, let's just say. So again, this gender equality paradox, kind of interesting, doesn't exactly address the reasons why women might have less interest in STEM fields, for example. So why don't we get into, can you just take us through outlining some of the causes of why there might be gender breakdown in STEM fields?
Okay, so one of the biggest concerns right now is talent pipeline issues, which basically means that the people coming into the workforce are not equal to the work that is necessary or happening, or just the makeup of the people entering the workforce.
Yeah, mostly it's just like the sheer number of women versus the sheer number of men coming into tech fields from, academic programs or other work experience or whatever it is. It's just the sheer volume.
So this information comes from the National Girls Collaborative Project, and they stated that although undergrad degrees in chemistry were awarded on what was basically an equal basis between genders, 51% for men and 49% for women, that gap grows considerably between undergraduate and graduate, where only 37% of PhD earners in chemistry are women. So for someone who might be interested in a tech degree like programming or web development or cybersecurity, that gender gap is especially pronounced in computer sciences. So in 2016, only 19% of computer science degrees were awarded to women, which was down from 27% in 1997.
Yeah, this is actually pretty
It's
upsetting.
hard to believe in 1997 that there were that many.
Well, so there's a long history here of women being more centrally involved in computer programming. I mean, we've talked about this with the early days of NASA and stuff like that. There have been women working in computer sciences for a very long time. But yes, we've recently, sort of in recent history, seen a decline in the number of women participating in computer science, and we have a ways to go.
Of all the STEM fields, engineering seems to be the one that might be the hardest hit by the gender gap. So in 2015, 20% of engineering undergraduate degrees were awarded to women. As with all of the sciences, this percentage changes drastically depending on the exact field of engineering, where only 13% of mechanical engineers' bachelors were awarded to women, and almost 50% of environmental engineering graduates were women. That's really interesting. I wonder why that is.
Yeah, so you start to just wonder, like, what are these nonsensical breakdowns about? Like, why are half of environmental engineering graduates women?
And
is there
not-
something particularly womanly about environmental
Feminine?
science? Why?
Yeah. So the last bit of data is that in 2015, 23% of doctoral degrees in engineering were awarded to women.
Jeez. So that kind of covers the academic pipeline into these career fields. Now, once you get there, there are further issues to consider in terms of what contributes to a gender gap in employment. This is, again, from that same organization, the American Association of University Women, another article from that. This is about pay disparities, and this is some recent data found that men in STEM, their annual salaries are almost $15,000 higher per year than women. So we got like $85,000, I think, was the average. Let's see, is it average annual salary compared to $60,828 for women? Latina and Black women in STEM earn around $33,000 less.
My God.
At an average of around $52,000 a year.
No.
Compared
No
to
wonder.
men. Yeah. Pay disparities, still a big deal. Lack of presence of women in organizational leadership. This is something I see a lot. There's a catalyst.org report. They found that in 2020, the percentage of women directorships and a comprehensive index of corporations, and we'll link to what that index was because there's some interesting methodology here, but there's this basically a big giant group of corporations, and from that report, they found that the percentage of women directorships stood at just 28.2% in the U.S. for this category of corporations. Compare that to France. For the same index, they kind of deserve some kudos because they had a whopping 43.3% representation for women directorships in that same category. And
It's
then
not as good as it could be, but it's better.
France is apparently more kind toward women in leadership, I guess. From that same report, there was a 2018 study that found that companies with a woman board chair were more likely to have a larger share of women board members, 28.3 compared to other companies. Compared to companies with men board chairs. So it's easier to balance out gender disparities when more women enter leadership.
I mean,
So strange.
just like women have to empower women is what it's getting down to. Like all of these data points are like, if women look out for women, women succeed.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be the end of the episode right there. Women support women.
We're just going to stop.
You know, I'm not in STEM, but I would say that a couple of the most important mentors in my life have been women.
Yeah.
And I know that you have been deeply, shaped and molded by women mentors. So I think there's something to be said for that. I think that there's...
Yeah, for sure. It's much easier to imagine yourself as being capable of leadership when you see someone who you understand on some sort of innate level doing that leadership. So, yeah.
It totally makes sense to me how women can look at other women doing something and be like, oh, I can totally achieve this.
Yeah, and I guess I would just have to say, though,
getting
that,
worked up.
Well, unfortunately, like you're saying, women supporting women is how we usher in the future, but we're in a position where we have to also demand that men support women, because until we can start to have a more balanced, a better ratio in a lot of these fields, it's going to require that we work together toward balance here. And again, people make all kinds of arguments about, the people best qualified for the job and all this stuff. But my brain always returns to this idea that if half of your population is women, why are 19% of your workers women?
Yeah.
And it just and if nothing else, just the way you come to an answer to that question should reveal some things about why these gaps exist. And again, I don't have like an agenda in asking it, but like if we have half a population that is women, why do we have so few women in some of these positions?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I would hope that you would just look around in the room and be like, what's missing? And it would be like inherently obvious. Goodness. I think I'm asking too much.
So this is kind of what you were talking about earlier. The other thing that we deal with a lot, or at least that I deal with a lot in my job, is stereotypes and gender norms and cultural forces that don't necessarily have anything to do with that particular institution or organization where you might be working, but that are deeply ingrained and connected to some of these issues. So, we have to grapple with issues like paid maternity leave, paid parental leave, both, though that shouldn't just be something that we only carve out for mothers. So paid parental leave is important for everyone, really. Childcare, healthcare, flexible work schedules, things that make it easy for people with families to continue to achieve professional success. I think the idea that we must force a choice between having a family and achieving professional success is very misguided. We have a lot invested in this country around that concept, where it's kind of one or the other, and that usually happens to the detriment of women, because women are typically the ones who fulfill the stay-at-home parenting mom role, and do not who typically put their careers on hold in order to pursue raising kids. So anyway, until we kind of can balance out the expectations around those sorts of things in society at large, we're still going to continue to have. So anyway, it's a very complex issue. It's going to require a lot of reform in terms of how we handle benefits and roles and expectations and things like that. So anyway, let's talk about whether or not
feels bleak.
It does. And I was gonna say let's talk about progress being made, because there's
no thanks,
not a lot. There's
okay.
There's less progress. There's less progress here going on than you might want there to be. You want to take us through? There's this 2020 Pew Research report that I found that's pretty interesting. You want to take us through a couple of these points?
Yeah.
Here?
So obviously the representation of women varies widely across all of the STEM occupations. So women do make up a large majority of all workers in health-related jobs.
Because women become nurses at incredible rates.
Yeah.
Yep, for example.
But they are still underrepresented in other job clusters. So something like a physical science, computing, engineering, right? More of these more traditional STEM fields. So currently, the trends in STEM degree attainment appear unlikely to substantially narrow the gaps.
Yeah.
Oh, this is I want to feel better about these opportunities, but I'm just not there yet. So since 2016, women's representation among the 6 STEM occupational clusters hasn't changed significantly. And so women account for 25% of those working in computer occupations. And the share of women in this fast-growing occupation cluster actually declined from 2000 to 2016 and then has remained stable since then. And that was kind of like the data we were talking about earlier, where from the 90s it had dropped. And then there was this new refocus on STEM. And so even with this huge refocus on STEM, we still don't see women re-entering the workforce at nearly the rate that they should be.
Well, the participation of women declined during that period of focus on STEM. So something during that effort to focus on STEM recruitment did not reach women the way we might have hoped.
Okay.
It's just depressing.
It is.
But there are a lot of orgs and initiatives working to balance gender disparity, despite those somewhat grim growth statistics. So why don't you take us through a couple of these?
Sure. So the first one is called womeninstem.org. their slogan, their goals are to empower and encourage high school girls to be a part of the movement to increase female representation in STEM. And they were founded at the University of Chicago Lab Schools as a mechanism to bridge the gap between social justice and academic fields. And their website, link included in show notes, has a whole section of gender stereotype issues and other concerns that women have about being in the fields. And essentially, their whole goal is to support especially high school women, young women, to be pursuing this type of work, to get support and finding financial, you know what I mean, like scholarships, opportunities, learning chances, everything. They're just trying to make these connections for young women who might not otherwise have those connections, like what we were talking about. You know, these might be people who don't have a mentor in the field to get their foot in the door or to learn things, and so,
or who might not be able to advocate for their own equal pay or something like that. Giving women and girls tools to confront some of these deeply ingrained issues in STEM fields.
So that was the womeninstem.org.
Yep. Just a couple others to throw in here. There's a Smithsonian Girls and Women in STEM Resource Center.
Big fan of the Smithsonian.
We sure are. We did a whole episode on the Smithsonian.
Smithson.
The Smithson. The Society of STEM Women of Color, their mission is to achieve professional liberation, the freedom to pursue one's professional goals to the extent of one's own aptitude without externally imposed limitations for all women, particularly those from historically underrepresented populations. So important work being done there. And then the last one was the National Academies. Again, they're the ones that produced that report you were talking about earlier, but the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, a committee on women in science, engineering, and medicine.
Oh.
Does some interesting work. The mandate of this committee is to coordinate, monitor, and advocate action to increase the participation, recognition, and leadership of women in science, engineering, and medicine, including women of color. So,
great.
These organizations all need to come up with slightly more concise mission statements. However, a lot of them are doing really good work in the field to advance career opportunities for women all around the world.
I'm glad to see that there is some work being done. It doesn't feel totally hopeless.
Yeah, I don't feel hopeless about it, but I do feel like we have to come to the point where we stop with the sort of mindless culture war battle around this conversation. Mm-hmm. We have to divorce this from like well, we should pick the best candidate. Oh no, we should diversify our stuff. Like this us versus them mentality around this conversation is pretty frustrating to me. I think what we need to do is just to realize that a diversity of perspectives can only ever help improve your organization or your product or your efficiency or your whatever. When you exclude voices from leadership or from participation in conversations that matter at your organization, or when you have too many of the same background or experience generally represented on your staff or on your board or wherever it may be, when you have too much homogeneity, you run the risk of missing things, missing business opportunities, missing biases, missing just all kinds of stuff. And that's why I think it's pretty important to consider the fact that if you're hostile to the idea of diversifying your board, for example, like why you are hostile toward it. Why is a gut reaction to that? No, well, we should hire the best candidates. We need to interrogate some of the presumptions around this conversation to move the needle. And I think, unfortunately, we're a little stuck in what ends up being surface level political debate about it. That's my 2 cents. Do you have wrap-up thoughts about this issue?
No, I mean, I always want to see women succeed in whatever that looks like. I would have expected some of the data to be more reflective of what seems like almost an inundation of STEM in the education world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you would think that
for such a phrase that I hear at the rate that I hear it.
Right.
I would hope.
You'd think that if we're being bombarded by encouragement to go into STEM fields, that we would be more likely to go into STEM fields, and we need to start asking why that's not happening. Yeah, no,
I agree with you. I think it's catchy right now. I think it will be something else in some point, and I'm waiting for the day that a bipartisan group of Congress people and senators are like, you know what, we don't have enough of critical thinkers or readers or but that's just my own personal bias showing.
Some of the data that I found, actually, as you mentioned, that was focusing on what younger students are more likely to pursue in their free time, for example, and girls are more likely to read. So they are more likely to self-identify with future career fields having to do with reading and comprehension than men, who tend to gravitate more toward math.
An activity that's
I mean, there's a lot of stuff there are a lot of factors that go into that. One thing I was reading was saying that like math fear is sort of more likely to be associated with women.
That's me.
Well, listen,
I'm terrified.
Listen, this is the warning. What this report was suggesting was that math fear tends to be more common in female teachers, and female teachers are more likely to pass on math fear to female students of their own. So,
oh no, I'm the problem.
So you're gonna have to go in and show off your math skills to your girls.
Oh no, I'll try.
It's important.
I did teach somebody how to figure out the interest rate of a car.
Well, there you go.
There we go. I'm going to call it done.
Some math skills.
STEM.
Yeah.
I'm a woman in STEM.
You sure are.
No, I just, I think that this work is important, obviously. And I hope that these are the future leaders and learners and educators who are figuring out new options for electricity and things like that. Like, that's what I'm hoping for. So if the push for STEM results in quite literally the saving of the earth, it will have been time well spent. I think that's where I stand.
Okay.
I think I got there.
All right.
Is that a bad place to be?
Oh, no.
I will say, you mentioned about girls when just like wanting to read. I started a new audiobook, and all I've been thinking about all day is like, oh, I wish I could listen to my audiobook. I'm still that child, turns out. So
I think we're probably ready to move on to fill in the blank.
Okay. You want to do the last episodes?
Yeah, I would love to. So, fill in the blank, for those of you who don't know, thank you for listening. Fill in the blank is a section where we just do a little trivia question. We are going to give you last week's response and then ask you another question. If you know the answer to this week's question, go ahead and write into us, hello@16to1.com, all spelled out. We would love to hear from you. And if you answer correctly, we'll send you a sticker. And even if you answer incorrectly, we might send you a sticker.
We will.
So just write in, say hello.
Don't let her bully you. Don't have math fear about fill in the blanks.
Wow. There's no math fear involved in this question, I don't think.
No, I'm just saying, don't like take that same fear.
True.
In my case, to this. Like, don't be afraid to respond, is my point.
Definitely don't. Last episode's question. This piece of legislation officially implemented the direct lending program, the modern-day incarnation of the federal student loan program in the U.S. Under this program, the government can now directly lend to student loan borrowers instead of through a private institution, which had previously been the only system since 1965. What was the name of that legislation? It was called the Student Loan Reform Act.
Okay.
This episode's question.
This episode's question is a callback from like the first 5 minutes of the show. What was the original acronym used for STEM? Before it was STEM, it was something else. And what was it?
All right. It was a little goofier than the one we ended up with somehow.
STEM is a great choice.
Yeah, it's an improvement.
Far better than what it was.
It's an improvement. So, what did you learn this week? Give us the rundown.
The Queen of England died. You probably didn't hear it here first, but she did. And watching all of that funeral, the traditions of that was so interesting to me. In America, we have nothing like that. Nothing nearly as interesting as the whole show of that. So that was interesting. And the last thing I'm going to plug, I've just been absorbing so much content right now, but there is a new PBS special done by Ken Burns, and it's called The Americans in the Holocaust, and it features a few people that I've worked with while involved with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. It's really, really well done. It's Ken Burns, so of course it is. But I would really recommend it because everyone that has watched it is like, oh, wow, America. Ugh. So.
Yeah, it's a little tough. It challenges some narratives that some of us might have become accustomed to with our involvement in World War II. We did not, from a sort of national standpoint, do as much as we could have done. And I think many countries were in the same position. So this is not just America that stands to this criticism. But yeah.
Lots of little things.
Yes, lots of little things.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So that's kind of all I've been doing for, I would say, like the past two, just kind of absorbing and finally in the swing of things at school. I think that's really it. I want to go see the new Harry Styles movie. I hope we have time for that. That's kind of all I have.
Okay.
I was just doing kind of a rundown. What about you?
I learned about this software called Notion, which I'd heard about for many, many years because it's popular in tech and startup spaces and stuff like that. It was trendy, or it is trendy. I'm a little bit behind the trend. But anyway, I discovered it, finally decided to give it a try. I think I'm going to kind of make it my new second brain, whereas Google Drive might have been fulfilling some of that before. But it's kind of like a...
How dare you?
Well, it's like a note-taking... It's just like where you can put all of the ideas that are rattling around in your brain.
How'd you find it?
Well,
TikTok?
No. I follow some tech people on Twitter, and they've used it. And I've been doing some research about how to build documentation and stuff where multiple people have to have hands on documents. I've been trying to look at different things that can handle a variety of different file formats and a collaboration first tool for managing a bunch of notes, basically. So I'm testing it out, and it's been a lot of fun. This is not a sponsored ad or anything, but this is just a
Notion and Target.
No, I know, right? No, I've had a really good time figuring it out and organizing things, and we'll see if I can stick with it. We'll see if I can be dedicated to using it, or whether it's just the new passing fancy in my life. But I'm hoping that it will help me manage some of my undiagnosed ADHD a little bit better.
Sure.
So we'll see how it goes. But I'm having fun with it so far. But that's what I learned about. Yeah.
That's way more productive for your life than mine is.
Yeah, I've been having fun.
That's half the battle. Woman in STEM.
I know.
Look at you.
Look at me. I'm using it with clients already. Yeah. Doing the STEM. All right. Well, thank you for hanging out with us. We will see you again in 2 weeks.
Goodbye.
Bye. Hey, listeners. Thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show. I am ready. I'm just keeping an eye on Aaron Judge's at-bats, okay?
Got it.
But I can do both.